You're listening to Media History Podcast.
where stories echo beyond the headlines.
Imagine a newspaper so powerful it could make or break reputations overnight. But what if that power was fueled, well, almost entirely by scandal, sensation, and maybe the darkest parts of human nature?
It's a fascinating and frankly a pretty troubling question, isn't it? And it perfectly frames the story we're exploring today, the incredible 168-year journey of the news of the world.
Right, a paper that for a very long time wasn't just something people read. It felt more like a national institution, almost a ritual.
Absolutely. Love it or hate it, millions read it every single week.
Welcome to the Media History Podcast. Today we're tracing the history of this infamous Sunday paper, from its surprisingly principled start to its rather spectacular downfall.
Our aim here is really to unpack this complex history, to give you a clearer picture of how tabloid power, for better or worse, evolved.
Before we jump into the timeline, there are a few things you really need to grasp about the sheer scale and, frankly, the contradictions of this paper. We've picked out 3 facts that kind of set the stage.
Yeah, these really capture the essence. First off, the numbers. In 1950, News of the World, or now W as we'll probably call it, set an actual world record for circulation.
Look at this. A single print run of over 8.6 million copies.
8.6 million. That meant something like 1 in every 3 adults in Britain was reading it. That's not just influence, that's saturation.
It's incredible. Okay, second fact.
Politics. In the 1930s, they had a columnist on a hefty retainer, 400 pounds an article, which was serious money then. That columnist was Winston Churchill.
Churchill, writing for News of the World.
Yep, and he used that massive platform to hammer Hitler and Stalin. Really aggressive stuff. So much so that apparently it genuinely worried the UK Foreign Office. They were trying to tread carefully in Europe, and here's Churchill, stirring the pot in Britain's biggest paper.
Wow. So the paper valued the sensation, the big name, over maybe diplomatic caution.
It seems that way. Big names, big controversies, big sales. And the third fact really foreshadows the end.
Okay.
In 1949, they paid expenses for and got handwritten notes from George Hay, the acid bath murderer, while he was in prison awaiting trial.
They paid a serial killer for his story.
Effectively, yes. In exchange for exclusivity, it's what became known as checkbook journalism, paying sources, often criminals or figures in scandals, for their stories.
That just sets a very dark precedent, doesn't it? Paying for access, maybe even shaping the narrative based on who pays.
Exactly. It blurs ethical lines right from the start. Reporting the news versus becoming part of the story, maybe even complicit. And this wasn't a one-off. It became, let's say, a tool in their arsenal.
Okay, so scale, political clout, and ethically dubious methods. Quite the starting point. Let's go back to the beginning then. 1843.
Right. John Brown Bell founds the News of the World. And you won't believe the original motto, given everything that came later.
Let me guess, something about truth.
Spot on. Our motto is truth. Our practice is fearless advocacy of the truth.
Fearless advocacy of the truth.
Okay.
Bit ironic in hindsight.
Just a bit. But Bell's genius wasn't just the motto, it was the strategy. He aimed for everyone. Rich, poor, didn't matter. And he priced it low, just 3 pence.
Accessible. What was the content mix like initially?
It was broad. Political news, naturally, bits on the money market, high society gossip, jokes even. But the real draw, the thing that took off almost immediately, crime.
Ah, the sensational stuff.
Absolutely. Detailed, often quite graphic reports from criminal courts, focusing on things like prostitution, theft, murder, particularly from London's poorer areas. It was like the original true crime podcast, but, in print.
And people snapped it up.
Instantly. Circulation jumped from maybe 12,000 to over 35,000 in just 3 years, which was huge then. They also figured out Sunday was the sweet spot. People had time to read these longer, more lurid stories.
Makes sense. But success breeds competition, I imagine.
It did. The big shakeup came in 1861. The government abolished the stamp duty, basically a tax that kept newspaper prices high.
So suddenly everyone could be cheap.
Pretty much. Now lost its main price advantage. Competition exploded, and their rankings started to slide. It was a real crisis. They realized being cheap wasn't enough anymore. They had to be irresistible.
Which leads us into a new era, right? A changing of the guard.
Exactly. By 1891, the paper was struggling. Ownership changed hands, going to Henry Lascelles Carr. But the key figure was his nephew, Emsley Carr, who was only 24 when he essentially took the reins as editor alongside a sharp lawyer named George Riddell.
A young team taking over a struggling paper. What did they do?
They revamped everything, modernized it, dropped the leave from the title just News of the World, changed the font, the layout, introduced regular columns, and crucially, permanent illustrations and photographs.
Visuals, making it more engaging, less dense.
Precisely. Riddell, meanwhile, was a machine at expanding distribution, getting it everywhere, and it worked. By 1899, they had a new slogan, more news than any other Sunday paper.
Ambitious. Did the numbers follow?
Dramatically. By 1900, they broke the 1 million circulation mark, a huge milestone. But Carr was smart. He saw society changing, especially the role of women readers.
Ah, so the content needed to evolve too.
Yes, and this led to some really controversial moves. In 1912, they published an article called Woman as Husband.
Woman as husband, what was that about?
It detailed a relationship between two women where one lived publicly as a man, worked as a plumber, and acted as the husband. For 1912, this was incredibly provocative stuff.
I can only imagine. Pushing boundaries to sell papers?
Absolutely. It was part of a deliberate strategy Carr called the feminization of the paper. Tap into that growing female audience with stories about relationships, society, scandal, even really unconventional ones. And it fueled growth. By 1921, they hit 3 million copies.
Wow. So successful, they were actually banned in Ireland in 1930.
Yeah, Ireland banned it temporarily to protect public morality. Which is quite something, isn't it? This mix of pushing social boundaries while also having figures like Churchill writing these very serious political columns.
Let's circle back to Churchill for a second. You mentioned the Foreign Office was worried. Did the paper face any real pushback for wading into foreign policy like that?
It was definitely a point of tension. Churchill wasn't just commenting. He was using this enormous platform, arguably, to campaign against the government's appeasement policy towards Hitler. It was disruptive.
But the paper itself didn't seem to mind the disruption.
It seems controversy was good for business. Churchill's name added a certain gravitas, even while the rest of the paper was diving deep into scandal and sensation. They managed this weird balancing act.
And they kept this up even through the wars.
They did. Emsley Carr actually visited the front lines during World War I, so they had serious war reporting, but they never dropped the entertainment, the fashion, the sports. People needed that escape, and now W provided both the grim reality and the distraction.
A potent combination. Which brings us to their absolute peak, right? The post-war era.
Yes, the golden age, as some call it, the 1950s. This is when they hit that staggering 8.6 million circulation record in 1950.
Under editor Arthur Waters. Did he have some secret formula?
He was surprisingly blunt about it. His formula, he said, was simple. Sex, crime, beer, and cricket in the summer, football in the winter.
Uh-huh. At least he was honest. Just give the people what they want.
Pretty much. No pretensions about high-minded journalism there. And this is when that checkbook journalism we talked about earlier really got cemented.
With the acid bath murderer Hay.
Exactly. That wasn't some weird outlier. It became standard practice. Need a scoop. Find someone involved in a crime or scandal and offer them money. They were willing to pay for the darkest stories.
Which must have attracted criticism, surely.
Increasingly so. Especially as they moved into the late 50s and 60s under a new editor, Stafford William Summerfield, who took over in 1959. He seemed to relish confrontation.
How so?
Take the Diana Dors incident in 1960. She was a famous actress, got an injunction to stop them publishing a particular photo.
So legally they couldn't publish it.
Right. What did Nandera do? They published it anyway. But they put a big black box over her nipple with the word banned printed on it.
Cheeky doesn't even cover it. That's just deliberately provocative.
Completely. The press council, the industry regulator, slammed them for it. Summerfield's response. Essentially, I'm proud of my paper. Outrage was the product.
But did that approach start to wear thin as culture changed in the 60s?
It certainly collided with it. In 1967, they ran big stories about alleged drug use by pop stars Donovan, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, often based on fairly thin evidence or rumor, apparently.
And these stories had real consequences.
Oh, yeah. They led directly to arrests and trials. The Jagger-Richards case, the Redlands bust, became this huge cultural flashpoint.
So the paper wasn't just reporting news, it was actively triggering police action against counterculture figures.
That's how it looked to many. And the backlash was significant. There were huge protests outside the News of the World offices, people chanting, "Free the Stones." It showed the paper's power, but also that people were starting to see it as, well, maybe the bad guy.
Interesting, a shift in public perception, perhaps.
Potentially, yeah. And all this turbulence formed the backdrop for a massive corporate battle at the end of the 60s.
The fight for ownership.
Exactly, a real clash of titans. Robert Maxwell versus a rising, ambitious publisher named Rupert Murdoch.
And Murdoch won.
He did. In 1969, Murdoch acquired News of the World, despite Summerfield, the editor, apparently being very much against it. Murdoch inherited this hugely powerful, incredibly profitable, but also deeply controversial machine.
Which takes us into the final act. Murdoch's era and the eventual fall. What was his approach?
Murdoch, it seems, saw the formula scandal, exposure, checkbook journalism, and decided to double down. He wasn't afraid of the controversy. He embraced it.
So, more exposés.
Definitely. They continued to break major national scandals. Lord Lambton, a government minister caught with prostitutes and drugs in 73, an abortion doctor, Sunita Kumara Ghatak, accused of malpractice in 75. These stories had huge impact, cemented the paper's reputation for getting scoops no one else would touch, or perhaps could touch ethically.
It kept selling papers, presumably.
Oh, yes. Although circulation had dipped from the absolute peak, it remained massive. And it got another boost in the early 80s under editor Derek Jameson.
What did he do differently?
Jameson really formalized the transition into what we now instantly recognize as a modern tabloid format. Punchier headlines, shorter stories, more pictures, relentless focus on celebrity and scandal. It worked. Commercially, circulation climbed back over 5 million.
It's interesting, though, amidst all this ramping up of sensation, there were female editors later on. Did that change the tone at all?
Well, Wendy Henry in the late 80s certainly kept the circulation high with plenty of scandalous content. Then came Patsy Chapman in the early 90s. And here's a real irony.
Go on.
Chapman was actually instrumental in creating the first formal code of conduct for the British press through the Press Complaints Commission in 1991.
The editor of News of the World helped write the ethical rulebook.
Kind of incredible, right? Even as her paper was still printing the kind of invasive stories the code was supposed to regulate, a strange dichotomy.
Definitely. And the methods for getting these stories were getting darker.
Progressively so. This era saw the rise of Masher Mahmoud, the infamous fake sheikh.
Ah, the master of disguise.
Exactly. He specialized in elaborate sting operations, often using hidden cameras, microphones, posing as a wealthy Arab sheikh to lure people into compromising situations.
Did he uncover genuine wrongdoing?
Sometimes, yes. He exposed corruption in football, like match fixing. He even claimed to have busted a plot to buy radioactive material for a dirty bomb in 2004. So some argue there was a public interest element.
But the methods? Entrapment, deception on a grand scale.
Extremely controversial. The line between investigative journalism and manufacturing the news became very, very blurry. And this culture of pushing boundaries, using any means necessary, what some inside called the dark arts, eventually led to the breaking point.
The phone hacking scandal.
It started coming to light, really, in 2007. Clive Goodman, the paper's royal correspondent, and a private investigator, Glenn Mulcair, were convicted and jailed for hacking the voicemails of royal aides.
Hacking phones. That's just straight up illegal.
Absolutely. Initially, the company tried to frame it as a couple of rogue operators, but the suspicion lingered that it was much more widespread.
And then came the revelation that sealed its fate.
The final nail in the coffin. In 2011, it emerged that back in 2002, the paper hadn't just hacked royals or celebrities. They had hacked the voicemail of a missing and later found murdered 13-year-old girl Millie Dowler.
Hacking a murdered child's phone.
And apparently deleting messages to make space, which gave her parents false hope she might still be alive and using her phone.
That's beyond unethical. It's horrific.
The public revulsion was immediate and overwhelming. This wasn't just tabloid excess anymore. It felt like a fundamental violation. Advertisers pulled out in droves almost overnight. Legal challenges mounted. The brand became toxic.
The collapse was swift then.
Incredibly swift. On July 7th, 2011, James Murdoch, Rupert's son, then running the UK newspaper arm, announced the paper would close. Just like that. 168 years of history, gone in days.
When was the final edition?
July 10th, 2011. Circulation was still around 3.8 million, remarkably. The front page was a montage of old covers with a simple message: thank you and goodbye.
And the staff?
Most were just shifted over to launch The Sun on Sunday the following week. The brand died, but the operation, in a way, continued under a different name.
So looking back at this whole sprawling, dramatic history, what's the main takeaway?
I think News of the World was undeniably revolutionary. It understood, maybe better than anyone, that deep human craving for secrets, for gossip, for sensation. It tapped into something fundamental, but its success was built on systematically breaking rules. First, the subtle ethical ones like checkbook journalism, blurring lines, then eventually the actual law with phone hacking. The relentless pursuit of the scoop, using any means necessary, finally consumed it. The thing that made it dominant also guaranteed its destruction.
It leaves us with a pretty profound question, doesn't it? Especially for you, listening now, thinking about this history. Does our collective appetite for sensation ultimately shape the media, forcing it towards these extremes?
Or does the media, by constantly pushing those boundaries, actually shape our appetite, normalizing intrusion and scandal until something finally snaps? It's a cycle, isn't it? Hard to say where it starts or ends.
Definitely something to ponder. We hope you found this exploration of the news of the world's history insightful.
We certainly found it a compelling, if sometimes disturbing, story to revisit.
Do join us again soon for the next Media History Podcast.
And stay curious.
See you soon.